Barry Lyndon wasn't just a historical drama. It was Stanley Kubrick's brutal obsession, disguised in lace, candles, and powdered wigs. What audiences saw was a painterly epic, dripping in elegance. What happened behind the scenes was a nightmare of endless retakes, fistfights with daylight, actors crushed under Kubrick's demands, and a cinematographer pushed to technological madness. From candlelit cameras borrowed from NASA to an actor forced to pee in a bottle mid-shot, this was no ordinary period piece. These are 20 weird facts about Barry Lyndon that will change the way you see this cinematic masterpiece forever. And stick around for the bonus fact, because what Kubrick left on the cutting room floor might be his greatest secret. Let's dive in. 1. Kubrick lit scenes with NASA's Frankenstein lens. Kubrick didn't want just realism, he wanted historical light. That meant actual candlelight, not simulated glow. But 1970s film stock couldn't handle it. Enter NASA. Kubrick sourced a Zeiss 50mm UFP f/0.7 lens, originally designed for space missions to photograph the dark side of the moon. Only 3 existed. He got 2. To make the lens fit a Mitchell BNC camera, engineers had to practically gut and rebuild it. The depth of field was razor thin. Actors could barely move. Focus pullers lost sleep. Entire shots were rescheduled when flames flickered too much. It wasn't just lighting, it was madness, lit by wax and obsession. No film before or since has used that lens the way Barry Lyndon did. The result? A movie that looks like an 18th century oil painting come to life, and a crew that nearly lost their minds achieving it. 2. Ryan O'Neal was cast for his bankability, not his talent. In a film known for its Kubrickian precision, Ryan O'Neal might seem like an odd choice. He wasn't a classically trained actor, he wasn't British. But in 1973, he had one major credential. He was hot off Love Story and was bankable. Warner Brothers made a demand. If Kubrick wanted his 3-hour epic funded, he needed a star. So Kubrick, the ultimate auteur, made a cold, calculating move. He cast Ryan O'Neal. Critics were mixed. Some praised O'Neal's blank expressions as perfect for the emotionally vacant Barry. Others saw it as a flaw. Kubrick didn't care. He wanted a cipher. What audiences didn't know, the studio wanted Robert Redford. Kubrick didn't. He picked O'Neal because he was both accessible and controllable. In classic Kubrick fashion, even the casting was a power play. 3. The film had over 300 days of shooting. If filming a period drama sounds grueling, imagine Barry Lyndon. Kubrick dragged his crew through 300 shooting days, not including post-production. Why so long? Kubrick's infamous perfectionism. He insisted on natural light, which meant shooting only during specific times of day. Cloudy skies, pack up, harsh sunlight? Wait. Crew members recall setting up 10 hours for 10 minutes of usable footage. Worse, there were no studio sets. Everything was shot on location across Ireland, England, and Germany. Each castle and manor had its own challenges, creaking floors, echoing halls, and logistical nightmares. One assistant called it the longest funeral march in cinematic history. But Kubrick pushed forward, frame by frame. By the end, the production wasn't just exhausted. It was transformed. What began as a costume drama had become a cinematic pilgrimage through hell. 4. The Extras War. Actual 18th century undergarments. Kubrick didn't just demand realism on the surface. He wanted it under the corsets, too. Every extra, no matter how far from camera, wore authentic 18th century undergarments. Most of these wouldn't even be seen on screen. But Kubrick believed the weight, feel, and discomfort would change posture, movement, and behavior. Women reported bruised ribs from tightly laced corsets. Men complained about itchy wool. One extra fainted during a long scene because they weren't allowed to loosen their bodices. This wasn't just vanity, it was method madness. Kubrick created a fully immersive world, even if only 5% ended up visible. What audiences didn't know, those noblemen sipping tea in the background. 5. Kubrick used live ammunition in the war scenes. Let's talk danger. The 7 years war sequences in Barry Lyndon are slow, symmetrical, and haunting, but they were also lethal. Kubrick insisted on historical accuracy, not just in formation, but in sound and visual authenticity. That meant using live musket balls and powder. Explosions were real. Muzzle flashes were unpredictable. One crew member reportedly suffered burns from an unexpected blast. Others dealt with shrapnel in their boots. Kubrick didn't flinch. He wanted chaos. And he got it. Actors weren't warned when charges would go off. The goal was realism through surprise. The result? Reactions that feel authentic because they were. Kubrick treated his film set like a war zone, and the crew felt like soldiers caught in the crossfire. 6. The duel scenes. Took weeks to perfect duels in Barry Lyndon are more than showdowns. They're rituals, slow, formal, drenched in dread. But they weren't just cinematic poetry. They were technical nightmares. Kubrick demanded symmetry in every frame. That meant dozens of retakes, adjusting posture, foot placement, even breathing. Ryan O'Neal had to stand motionless for minutes while holding a cocked pistol. The room was dead silent. Every crew member held their breath. One blink could ruin the shot. One duel scene took nearly 2 weeks to film. And the tension? It wasn't all acting. O'Neal was reportedly so stressed he developed tremors. It wasn't just a scene, it was a trial by fire, and it made audiences squirm, not because of violence, but because of anticipation. That's Kubrick's genius. Not shock, but slow burn terror. 7. Stanley Kubrick refused to fly during production. Kubrick was famously reclusive, but few know he had a paralyzing fear of flying. So when he decided to shoot in Ireland and Germany, he didn't hop on a jet. He sent the crew on planes and drove himself, sometimes for days, across Europe. This affected the schedule constantly. Locations had to be chosen based on accessibility by car. When last-minute changes were needed, he'd delay shooting until he could arrive by land. Some locations were scrapped entirely because they were unreachable without air travel. Kubrick's fear even influenced casting meetings. He refused to fly actors in for auditions. Instead, they had to come to him. It wasn't just control. It was phobia management. Yet somehow, he orchestrated one of cinema's most globe-spanning productions without ever leaving the ground. That's commitment. And a little madness. 8th Irish Republicans bombed the film set. While filming in Ireland, the production found itself in the crosshairs of real-world violence. At the time, the Troubles were at their peak. Tensions between Irish Republicans and the British presence were deadly. Kubrick's crew had permission to shoot in County Wicklow, but their association with British aristocracy themes and use of real British military uniforms drew ire. One night, a car bomb exploded outside a nearby hotel housing several crew members. No one was killed, but the message was clear. You're not welcome. Kubrick, ever cautious, pulled the entire production out of Ireland within days. What audiences didn't know, the serenity on screen was built on a minefield, literal and political. Kubrick finished much of the remaining shoot in England and Germany, far from the tension, but never far from the memory. 9. The film's music was edited with mathematical precision. Kubrick didn't compose music, he engineered it. For Barry Lyndon, he hand-selected classical compositions by Handel, Schubert, Bach, and traditional Irish folk tunes. But here's the catch. He didn't just lay them over scenes. Every bar, tempo shift, and movement was timed to match camera motion and scene rhythm. He instructed editor Tony Lawson to align crescendos with gestures, pauses with stares, and string flourishes with landscape pans. This wasn't about emotion, it was about structure. Scenes were re-edited to fit music, not the other way around. What results is a hypnotic tone, where the film feels more like a visual symphony than a drama. But behind the elegance, spreadsheet-level timing. It's not just soundtrack, it's choreography between image and sound, orchestrated with Kubrick's cold, exacting brilliance. 10. The final scene was originally very different. That chilling final title card, "They are all equal now," wasn't always the plan. Originally, Kubrick wanted a more traditional epilogue showing Barry living out his life as an amputee, begging in the streets. Scripts from early drafts show a broken man, scorned by society. But Kubrick scrapped it. He opted instead for ambiguity and distance. The film ends not with a bang, but a historical shrug. Test audiences were reportedly disturbed by the ending's coldness. That's exactly what Kubrick wanted. Not tragedy, not redemption, just entropy. If you're marveling at how far Kubrick went to craft every frame, go ahead and like and subscribe, because we've still got 10 more facts coming, and they only get weirder. From banned actors to historic lens crimes, Kubrick left no candle unburned. 11. Marissa Berenson was told to speak less. Marissa Berenson, who played Lady Lyndon, was praised for her beauty and elegance. But did you notice how quiet she is throughout the film? That was deliberate. Kubrick reportedly told her, "Don't act, don't speak, just be." He believed her physical presence was enough, that her silence made her more mysterious and tragic. Berenson would spend hours on set, preparing for scenes only to have her lines cut last minute. In one notorious case, Kubrick cut an entire speech she rehearsed for weeks, minutes before the cameras rolled. The result was a haunting, voiceless figure, trapped in an ornate world. Critics called her performance mesmerizing, but behind the scenes, Berenson felt muted, literally. Kubrick didn't just direct actors. He sculpted them into his vision, word by silencing word. 12. Over 30 locations were used, and none were sets. Kubrick refused to build a single set. Every scene in Barry Lyndon was filmed at a real historical location: castles, manors, cathedrals, gardens, most of which had never hosted film crews before. This created constant logistical nightmares. Some stately homes wouldn't allow lighting rigs or wires. Others had walls too fragile for boom mics. Crew members had to work around centuries-old furniture. Sometimes they had to shoot in near silence because of fragile chandeliers or antique flooring. But the result? A film that breathes authenticity. You don't just see 18th century Europe. You feel it. What looks effortless on screen was actually a constant battle between preservation and production. Kubrick didn't film inspired by the 1700s. He filmed inside it. 13. Ryan O'Neal's son appears, and it's tragic. In a brief but poignant scene, Barry's young son Brian appears, tugging at his heart. What most audiences don't realize is that the boy is Ryan O'Neal's real-life son, Griffin O'Neal. Kubrick cast him to amplify the father-son connection. And it worked. Their scenes are warm, natural, and tragic, especially the one before Brian's fatal fall. But in real life, things unraveled. Just a few years later, Griffin would fall into substance abuse, family turmoil, and eventually be estranged from Ryan. What appears as cinematic heartbreak on screen became eerie foreshadowing in real life. Kubrick captured a moment of real father-son tenderness right before their lives drifted apart. 14. The battle scene was shot using 10,000 extras, digital extras, in 1975? Not exactly, but Kubrick wanted to simulate a massive battlefield, and he didn't have thousands of soldiers. So he created the illusion with clever tricks. He filmed dozens of formations from different angles and distances using long takes and careful blocking. Then he layered the shots in editing using optical compositing, an analog predecessor to digital CGI. Each formation was a real group of extras, doubled, tripled, reversed, and repeated. Some scenes reportedly had just 200 extras made to look like 10,000. Kubrick didn't just stretch his budget, he expanded the battlefield. 15. Kubrick wrote fake reviews to promote the film. Despite the visual beauty, Barry Lyndon wasn't a box office smash. Critics were divided, audiences were lukewarm. So what did Kubrick do? According to crew rumors, he secretly wrote glowing fake reviews under pseudonyms and submitted them to newspapers and magazines. Some even made it into early trade publications. His goal? Shift public perception. While no publication has confirmed the hoax, the writing style in some early reviews matches Kubrick's known mannerisms. technical praise, anti-sentimental language, and intellectual superiority. If true, it wouldn't be out of character. Kubrick was always controlling, not just of his film, but of its legacy. 16. The movie was a box office disappointment. At first, for all its grandeur, Barry Lyndon barely broke even in the U.S. Audiences were confused by its cold tone and slow pace. It wasn't action-packed, it wasn't romantic, it was painterly and punishing. Warner Brothers panicked. Marketing was changed mid-release. Posters were redesigned. The trailer was recut to look like an adventure film. But it was too late. The U.S. box office limped. Ironically, Europe embraced it. France and Germany called it a masterpiece. Over time, critics re-evaluated it. Now it sits among Kubrick's most revered works. What flopped in '75 now sparkles in Criterion collections and academic essays. Kubrick was ahead of his time. Again. 17. One scene. Took 95. Takes Kubrick's perfectionism is legendary, but Barry Lyndon pushed even his limits. In one sequence, Barry approaching Lady Lyndon at a gambling table, Kubrick shot the scene 95 times. Why? The smoke, the candlelight, the blocking, the pacing. If one puff of cigar smoke wafted too soon, cut. If the camera dolly jerked slightly, cut. If O'Neill blinked wrong, cut. Crew members were in disbelief. The actress playing Lady Lyndon reportedly cried from exhaustion. But Kubrick got what he wanted, a scene that feels slow, seductive, and inevitable. One moment carved out of nearly 100 attempts. Not madness, method, or maybe both. 18. Kubrick was sued by a historical estate. One of the grand estates used in the film, Castle Howard in Yorkshire, became a site of controversy after production wrapped. The estate owners claimed that Kubrick and his crew damaged priceless interior decor during filming. Wallpaper was allegedly torn, furniture scratched, and antique drapery stained by heat and candle soot. Kubrick, ever meticulous, had contracts in place, but the restoration costs exceeded expectations. Legal threats were made. A quiet settlement followed. What audiences saw as pristine and untouched 18th-century elegance came with a modern price tag and off-camera lawsuits. Kubrick's desire for authenticity came at a cost, both financial and historical. He left behind more than just celluloid beauty. He left a trail of restoration bills. 19. No artificial light was used, even outdoors. We've talked about candlelight, but Kubrick's light obsession went beyond interiors. He banned all artificial lighting, even for exteriors. That meant no reflectors, no bounce boards, and no on-location generators. Cinematographer John Alcott had to use only what nature provided: sun, clouds, shadows, and patience. This meant entire days were sometimes wasted waiting for the right kind of overcast. Harsh light, cancel the shot. Unexpected sunset, move the schedule. Makeup artists had to adjust for shadows they couldn't predict. Wardrobe had to fight color washout. Continuity became a nightmare. But it paid off. The film glows with organic light. What feels effortless is, in truth, a calculated rebellion against studio filmmaking. 20th, Kubrick made actors rehearse without emotion. Kubrick's directing methods were often seen as cold, but in Barry Lyndon, he took it to an extreme. He made actors rehearse without inflection, tone, or emotion, delivering lines like robots. His goal? Strip away theatricality, make them neutral. Blank, natural. Then, during filming, he'd push for sudden emotional shifts, but only after hours of mechanical delivery. This often frustrated actors like Ryan O'Neal, who once snapped, "Am I playing a man or a mannequin?" Kubrick responded with silence. He believed the real drama wasn't in performance, it was in circumstance and composition. He wanted emotion to emerge from context, not acting. This method gave Barry Lyndon its famous emotional detachment and its haunting resonance. Bonus fact: a secret scene was shot and destroyed. Here's the one almost no one knows. Kubrick filmed a secret epilogue. It showed an aged Barry Lyndon in a wheelchair, watching fireworks alone, forgotten, penniless, and broken. His face, lit only by sparks in the sky, was said to be devastatingly human. The scene was cut weeks before final delivery. Rumors say Kubrick personally burned the negative, fearing it offered too much closure. No stills exist, no footage survives. Only whispered testimonies from editors and assistants. It was Kubrick's final act of control. Erase the humanity. Preserve the myth. A scene lost forever, except in legend. Barry Lyndon wasn't just a film. It was a war between light and shadow, control and chaos, beauty and brutality. It nearly broke its crew. It confused its audience. It baffled critics. But in its silence, symmetry, and stillness, it made history. Kubrick didn't direct a story. He resurrected an era. He bent time, light, and actors to his vision, no matter the cost. Today, Barry Lyndon stands as a monument, not to passion, but to precision. A film that punished everyone who made it and rewarded everyone who watches it. So if you love diving into the hidden chaos behind cinematic perfection, hit that like button, subscribe for more untold movie truths, and remember, in Kubrick's world, even stillness burns.